It's actually my third time having the privilege to talk with you guys at Mobile Europe, so thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate it, SSA. I was just listening actually to your previous speaker, Santiago, and one of the things I did pick up on was his comments around the EU market and 5G SA and being a little bit behind the US and some other Asian countries. And I can totally concur with that. But what's actually quite nice is my colleagues in the US are actually having the pain first. So when they're developing new stuff and working with the agencies, they're actually doing a lot of the hard donkey work. So I can sort of ride on their coattails a little bit and help our customers in Europe and some of the other Asian countries as we're moving forward. Right, let me talk a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to give people a quick introduction to who SSA are and what lawful intelligence is and what lawfully mandated intelligence is, what we do to protect society. And then I'm going to sort of go over a couple of techie slides very quickly just to sort of frame the discussion about lawful intelligence and where we are at the moment within the standards bodies. But I won't focus on that too much. It's just after lunch and I don't want people getting too bored. I'm then going to talk a little bit about some of the improvements we've done, some of the development work we've done within the standards, about handover and about packet data header reporting, which is actually becoming more and more prevalent to help with this big tsunami of data that we're starting to see coming through. I'm also going to talk very briefly on target identifiers, a little bit about the standards unification, because that's actually really interesting as well, with the changes to the network vendors and what the standards bodies have pushed on them and how that's impacted us. I'm also going to talk a bit about warrant management and about how that's happened in the networks and about what we're doing with warrant management and the automation of the process. That's whereby somebody is under suspicion of something and the process that we do to actually get the approval to go and do targeted interception capabilities. I'm also going to talk about voice over NR, voice over new radio, which is actually moving away from where we are at the moment. And that's actually quite an interesting one. Some of the stuff that's coming off the back of that and the new codecs and the amount of data in the fields and what's just in the pipeline that's due to be coming to fruition with new codecs and what we're going to be able to do. I'll touch a little bit on subscriber identification. And if I've got time at the end, I'll talk a little bit about 5G location and about where we're moving with 3D mapping and about angles of ascent and whatnot. So that's kind of a summary of what we're going to talk about today over the half an hour. I'd like the session to be interactive. So if there's any questions or anything like that, as they come in, please shout them at me. I don't have them popping up on my screen, I don't think, but please make it interactive. If there's anything you want to know when I'm on it, there will be a Q&A session at the end, but if you want to ask something during the thing, please, I welcome it. Happy to have that sort of dialogue and that backwards and forwards. And if we need a deep dive, we can always take something offline. And if I don't know, again, I'm sure I know a colleague that will, and I'll be able to come back to you guys on it. Right. So very quickly, a little bit about me. David Anstis. I work for a company called SS8. I work for the CTO, Dr. Jamal Dickman, who's one of the foremost experts on lawful intelligence. He was one of the first creators of the CALIA standard in the US in the late 90s. So I've got the privilege of working with him, and I've worked for the company for about 8.5 years now. I specialised in mobile packet core, and that's what I'm going to sort of touch on a little bit about as well today. And I'm going to take you guys through where we are with the standards and what we can do. So SSA as a company, what do we do? So our mandate is to protect society. We work with communication service providers, telco operators to meet their regulatory compliance obligations. So when you're actually providing a service, there's certain mandates you have to sign up to as a CSP. And what we do is we help with the bits for law enforcement. So we also work with law enforcement government agencies, and where appropriate, we give them the ability to gain lawful access to mission critical data, communications, and location intelligence. And we provide the different services as we go through that. The focus of this work is actually to prevent serious threat to life, protect vulnerable people from abuse and slavery, and disrupt organised crime. Now, that's the key message. We're not looking at targeting, petty crimes and small level things. This is industrial scale abuse or trafficking, as I say, or threat to life, serious threat to life with terror. And that's what these systems are used for, and that's what they're designed for. Now, in the marketplace itself, I'll just quickly talk about what lawful intelligence is. There are several strings to the bow. So with your networks and your connected devices, governments have the ability to, through a lawful and judicial process, gain access to the data. And what we do is provide different parts of this. The first bit within a CSP network is something called mediation, not to be confused with billing, mediation, and revenue. Mediation to us in the lawful intelligence community is a secure system that can directly provision network elements and target and provide targeted interception to extract communication data, be it voice, data, SMS, whatnot, within the network. That's the fundamental thing. We apply a warrant for a set period of time. That data is then extracted from the network. Now, we can do that by either directly provisioning the network elements or through using passive probes and sensor technology, which sits on optical taps and extract the data on the wire. We've got 200 gig NIC interfaces. We're looking at 400 gig for the QSFPs for the sensors. So we have the ability to actually target data within a network. Now, that was all well and good until 5G came along. When 5G came along, the passive probe capability kind of dwindled. Everything is encrypted. Everything has a secure connection. And I'm a real advocate for security. And I think that is the correct way to go. The challenge we have is that we still need to get the data off the networks. So we now have to rely on third-party interfaces and to talk to the direct vendors to be able to extract that data. The data is then mediated, as we call it, and delivered to law enforcement. So by mediated, we mean we format it into the correct standard, be it ETSI, be it 3GPP, be it CALIA, for that agency to be able to receive it into their monitoring facility and reconstruct the calls, be able to view the data, reconstruct the websites, play back the relevant calls or SMS or MMSs. We also provide a data retention capability. So that would be your comms data record. So every network element, every device in the network has a CDR record or comms data record or charging data record, however you want to call it. Now, these comms data records can be used evidentially for where a phone was historically. It doesn't give a very granular level of accuracy, but as part of the billing, mediation, and revenue, which is separate, it gives a paper copy of what's happened with that device. So you're able to look back through historically about where a cell site was and where a person was. We also have a location intelligence capability within our remit, whereby we have SMLCs and GMLCs, so network elements that you can put in the network to be able to extract location. We can also interface directly with certain third parties, so Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei, people like that. We can take the RAN logs and we can actually identify the location of people through those particular capabilities and give a very granular level of access. So you've got two types, active and passive. The one that people most would know would be an active location capability, whereby a child goes missing, they've got a phone, you can request authorization to ping it. And that's quite a low level of authorization. Most people within law enforcement can actually do that, just an SIO to approve it, and they can then ask the operator, who will then give them a course location. But what we're finding is with 5G, the location gets a lot more accurate and a lot better for law enforcement. And I'll talk a bit about that at the end of the slideshow. So from the law enforcement side, I'll only touch on it quickly. We provide advanced mapping, reconstruction of voice and data, analytics of the metadata, and we can also bring other data sources into that within the intelligence community to help them with their analysis work of where people are in the subject. So let's talk about the changes that 5G introduced. So there's four real tranches to this: performance, network topology, enhanced location, and encryption capabilities. So we will talk a little bit about the high throughput and about what we're seeing there, and about how ultra low latency and other stuff is improving the accuracy. We'll also talk about the new identifiers very quickly, about the fact that we're transitioning away from the traditional MISD and IMSI, IMEI to new identifiers. And you've got to be able to manage both your 4G and 5G networks until they completely merge, and how to be able to do that. We'll also talk a bit about the location, the X and the Y and the Z axis, and then being able to talk about, the vertical and how we're actually able to place people into 3D mapping and buildings. There's some good, there's some bad, there's some indifferent in that, but it's emerging and it's a really powerful tool, which is moving us away from the traditional 2D map and cell site looks. Won't touch too much on IMSI, on the encryption. We will talk a little bit about the IMSI grabbers, so cell site simulators, the ability to track and put up the location on somebody or to try and find a device, and about what we've done around that. So I'll touch on that as well as part of the talk today. So the first of my two boring slides after lunch. The first is about new LI specifications and requirements. So one of the things that came out of the 3GPP bodies and the ETSI community, of which I support through SSA, was the ability to redesign how LI works. So there's a very formal functionality now, whereas before it was kind of like, just give us this end product. Now this is how you must make that end product work. But the other good thing that they did was they actually identified the relevant points of interception, and they also provided a standardization moving forward. And I'll touch on that a bit more later. So the key thing was they started a new body for the implementation, 33128. That's a delivery standard. That's a standard that all law enforcement agencies must accept as part of their monitoring suite. They decided, luckily, to reuse the transport for the handover interfaces for 2 and 3 using part 7, which is good. And also they did implement a new IRI and CC PDU structure. So IRI is intercept related information. That's like the metadata associated with a phone or a device. CC is the content of communication. So that's what the phone is actually looking at. That's the actual payload of the data, shall we say. And they've actually restructured that. And that's something that we had to do within our law enforcement monitoring functions that are required to be upgraded. So my second technical and boring slide is the 5G requirements for the new LI interfaces. So there was some deltas in here which were quite interesting. One of them is the handover interface 1, which is the law enforcement to the mediation capability, or LICF as it's showing up there at the moment. There's talk of automation of that, and we've actually done some work around e-warrant management outside of the standards and also contributed to the standards body to enhance it because we saw a lot of problems with that. But there's some new interfaces that have been brought in. It hasn't been delivered yet, but X0 is coming out. So X0 is a security protocol that basically talks between the mediation device and the network element, and it allows us to secure like an IPsec tunnel between the two devices. So it encrypts it before we start to share data with the device. And I'll talk a bit more about that, about proprietary interfaces in a bit. The other thing it offers is the HI4 interface. So HI4 is going to be used more widely when we move into IoT devices. So at the moment, when I've got my phone at the moment, if I was to buy a phone contract with Vodafone, some of the expectations will be that in the future, I will get 100, 200 licenses for IoT devices, low-powered IoT. At the moment, my fridge, my Hoover, everything is connected at home, my TVs, through my home broadband router. And that's how I connect to the internet. That's how I can access my devices. With low-powered IoT, going to replace the home broadband router. And the idea being that all of my connected devices can be on one account. And the HI4 will give you part of that information. They'll tell you how many devices are active under David's phone, and then they'll go through the data sets themselves. So it's quite an interesting one that's going to be coming out, but it's still a little bit ahead of the curve and not been heavily utilized yet. Okay. So let's talk about the impact of 5G, which is what we're really here for. So one of the things that I like to talk about is 5G and the transport. So when I started my career back in the late 90s, I'm not going to give the exact date, I was working on 2G stuff. So I was there just before wireless application protocol came out. So I was there at the inception of GPRS and GPRS tunneling. So we're using TDM, time division multiplexing, and chopping time slots up within a circuit switch core, effectively, to give people internet access. And we had a very low, sort of 12 kilobit or whatever it was session, and you had multiple little sub packets to be able to get a 48 kilobit session. But that was kind of what we were doing with GPRS. And then Edge technology came out, which gave you the bundles. So I can remember that and taking the analog tax systems out. But as things have developed and gone on in my career, the data rates have increased and increased and increased, which is great. But the handover standards hadn't really come up to snuff with addressing them. So what I'm showing you now is the access function, the solution, and the monitoring center. On the left of the screen with the access function, that's your network element. So that could be an interconnect SBC, an access SBC. It could be a broadband network router for your broadband service. It could be a packet gateway. It could be any of those sort of network elements. Now, what the access function does is it establishes a secure TCP connection with our mediation solution. So the product that's actually asking for the intercept and then receiving the data to format it and deliver it to the monitoring center. So on one side, we've got the internal network interfaces, and on the other side, we've got the handover interfaces as we term them. Now, the interesting thing is that with 5G, we've kind of gone above the threshold for a single socket and TCP connection. So I didn't write the equation, but one of my colleagues did. So one of the things that we found out that with a single TCP and socket connection, with the best of network intentions, best of network connectivity, the maximum you're going to get is about 1.4 gig. In reality, we're seeing about 1.2 or 1, even at best, before it starts dropping packets. So when it starts dropping packets, you get packet loss. You don't get all the data, and the law enforcement and agencies are not happy with you for that, because they're not able to see everything, fully reconstruct. There's a lot of stuff going backwards and forwards. So one of the things that we've done is actually look at the multi-TCP socket approach. So this means that we have anything above a gig has a multiple socket thing. So we worked with, it was actually Cisco at the time, and it took us about 9 months to figure this all out. And they actually published it as part of the 3GPP specifications. And this is what is used by all network providers now, is this multi-TCP socket approach. When we went to speak to one of the agencies in the US about this, the FBI looked at us and went, what do you mean, this? And we explained again, they were going to have this approach. And they said, oh, great. That's going to take us a little while. So it's talking to your colleagues and your for agencies and people, and keeping them in step tone with it. Now, the challenge is with telco operators, we're quite blessed in the sense that we have the ability to change things up very quickly. So we're actually able to go through stuff and say, yeah, we're going to go to this technology, we're going to roll it out. And 7 years later, something new comes along, shiny, we're done. Some of these law enforcement agencies, they've got things that are 10 years old. They're not scaled and designed to meet these obligations. So one of the things we actually do is optimize this. So packet data header reporting and retained data delivery. So what am I talking about here? So what we've got at the moment is a lot of traffic that comes into the network is video streaming. So you're talking Netflix, you're talking Hulu, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, that sort of stuff. Now, that's not really worth a lot to the agencies. You think if I've got a 4K connection plumbed into my TV at home, I'm going to be using 4 or 5 megabits per second just purely to stream that thing, or maybe 8 megabits per second if it's higher resolution. So, and I'm just literally streaming encrypted video content. It's of no real interest to the monitoring center. But when I've got 100 or 200 or 300 people on warrant, all streaming videos at night, it starts to fill up my pipe very quickly. And the things in orange on the right-hand side, the links in orange, are very expensive because they're very secure. They're normally encrypted. They normally got VPNs. They've normally got, on top of that, crypto devices. So to get a single gig link is expensive. And likewise, with the LMF, they're normally scaled to be able to support a certain amount of ingest. And all of a sudden, you're getting this increase in traffic going on with 5G. So one of the things we developed was packet header data reporting. And this gives you the ability to provide a summary report for the content of communication, so the payload. So every 30 seconds, you say, right, I've seen this amount of packets, this amount of data, and you give it a summary report, and you send that. So the law enforcement agencies are happy. You can discard the data, or you could retain it, and they could do it on-demand delivery. They could do it at a low traffic period, or they could ask for it and say, actually, I want to just check that out, make sure there's no metadata in there that I need from the content. So we'll provide it to them. And what we're noticing is that that's reducing the traffic for delivery. So this sits in the CSP network over those network links. And we're talking about 80% reduction in traffic, which is huge to these guys. It's allowing them to see the wood for the trees. And one of the other things that we're finding with this is they're not just wanting it as a part of our mediation solution. They want this as an application so that they can deploy it virtually, either behind another third-party mediation supplier, because there are others, or at the monitoring center end for the LAMF. So i.e. where it's coming into the monitoring center, they try and filter it down before it goes into their product. And that's something we're doing at the moment, is actually developing and enhancing this so that it can dynamically identify the traffic. And then secondly, it can reduce it at different points for them wherever they wish to spin it. Okay. So I'll just touch on this briefly. So the devices for 3G and 4G have never really changed, even 2G, IMSI, IMEI, Misden. We all know and love them. In 5G, they decided to change them up, and we've now got a SUPI and a SUKI, which I'll talk about a little bit later, the permanent equipment identifier and GPSI. Now, for example, IMEIs, why do I include them in there? We get a lot of things where people are changing SIM cards, but they're buying phones, but previously they used to buy really cheap burner phones that were like a 2G or a 3G one that had it wasn't even a feature phone. Now they're getting more expensive handsets. They don't like to throw them away. So what we're finding is that they're swapping SIM cards more. So again, that's something that we do. So when people are targeted, it's sometimes on the IMEI as opposed to the other bits, which is really interesting as part of the deal. Now, what I'll do now is I'll click forward and talk a little bit about the standards unification. So one of the things that you'll find with standards unification is that all vendors, excuse me, sorry, 2 seconds. All of the vendors, Ericsson, Samsung, Nokia, Huawei, Streamwide, Mavenir, Motorola, all of these guys have proprietary network interfaces. So proprietary network interfaces mean they use their own command line infrastructure to be able to talk to. So we'd have to program in Ericsson's language to commission that, to receive the data. We'd have to program in Nokia's command line for them. And it's a way that we actually work within the network as part of this. So that's always been part of the challenge with working in this way. Now, as we've moved to 5G, it's becoming a standards-driven approach. Let me build this out quickly. So what that means is these standards are making each one of these vendors perform to a certain command line structure. So it makes my job a lot easier. When I develop a standard, I only have to do it once. I don't have to do it 12 or 13 times as the network changes and evolves. It's the same command line structure, which is really, really helpful. And that's the particular type and brands of the things. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about automated warrant management. And this is actually quite an interesting subject. So due to the level of collateral intrusion that you'll see, the process of implementing target interception is really stringent. The officers will have to pull a case file together to justify the seriousness of the suspect crime, and they're required to show they've exhausted all avenues of investigation before they can go through the different things. Now, normally there's sort of 3 authorizing stakeholders that you'll see within a warrant approval: senior officer, judicial review, and I've put down political, but sometimes this is civilian oversight committees. Each one will have to do a sign-off to be able to get the warrant approved before they can actually target interception in the networks. Now, one of the things that comes out of this, one of the reasons I mention this, is that once that's all signed and done, they're normally electronic copies, but sometimes you'll find they're paper copies, and the warrant is then sent to the CSP for manual upload. Now, the thing that we found is in some countries, these approvals are sent via secure courier that aren't very secure. So people are actually opening the letters, tampering with what's going on, and then informing the people for money before the warrant is applied that they're under suspicion or they're under a targeted interception. So that's one of the main things that we're working on right now. So to avoid that, what we've done is implement this electronic warrant capability, whereby the warrants are sent electronically, they're approved, they're automatically stored, and then the approval process gets very quick. The other thing is that when the manual entry goes in, there is always human error. You know, potentially you could type it wrong, you could mistype something. So what happens here is the law enforcement will send the request through electronically, and rather than have to type the stuff in, the warrant application, the CSP just pushes a button and says, yes, I acknowledge that, and that can go on for 30 days as per the warrant. So it's a lot more secure. The fact we're using thin clients and controlled access and automating the process makes it a lot quicker as well. So the checks and balances are still in place, and we're still able to do that. But there are nuances in every country and regional laws, so we have to be a bit mindful of that. So as that is applied, the relevant network elements will then deliver the data through to the agency. Okay, I'm quite conscious of time, so I'm going to whiz through into the next one. So voice over 5G NR. So at the moment, currently, we're seeing a lot of people still deploying 5G cores, but using the 4G network for the voice. So we're noticing that the eNode Bs are still being used, and the IMS is directly connected to the evolved packet core. Now, we are starting to see in two US carriers I could name off the top of my head, they're moving to 5G over NR. Now, the challenge with 5G over NR is over new radio is it basically connects the core network to the IMS. So rather than just doing data, it's now doing voice and data. But there are, as I say, there's a limited number of deployments. We're seeing it on both coasts of the US at the moment, where there is a higher density of 5G cells. There's about 6 handsets on the market, 4 or 5 Android ones, and a Google handset, 4 or 5 Samsung devices that are actually capable of doing this. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the voice quality and why it's important to us. So one of the things you'll find is there's three key parts to voice: frequency, sample rates, and bit rate. The frequency is the pitch at which you hear the voice. And now human hearing is between 20 hertz and 28,000 hertz, something like that. So it's quite a range. The lower pitch is obviously a deeper voice, and higher pitch is obviously the higher the frequency, the higher the pitch as well. So there's a big range there. Now, what we're seeing at the moment is traditional telephony was narrowband, what we call narrowband. It sounded a bit tinny, and it was mono, single voice, single microphone, and nothing's really changed on that. As we've moved through in VoLTE, we went to wideband AMR, which gave us something called HD voice. So it was a lot clearer and gave us the ability to hear. Now, the bit rates and the usage of the codec increase. So, for example, a narrowband call would be about 12 kilobits. An AMR wideband call, adaptive multi-rate wideband, would be 24 kilobits. And as you move on, they increase. Now, there was also a codec developed called EVS, which is enhanced voice services. Now, enhanced voice services offers you HD+. It was developed during VoLTE, but it's very processor intensive. It's quite a high use case. You can deliver that in 128 kilobits. You can deliver it in less with compression. But the challenge we have with voice over new radio is that as you move to a new codec, we need to deploy that into the monitoring centers as well to enable those people to be able to do their job. There's also another one I'll touch on very quickly because I know time's running out. We have another thing coming up, which is called IVAS. I'm just looking for my notes on IVAS. So that's immersive voice and audio services. So this is a fundamental difference between what we've seen previously. It doesn't use the mono voice, i.e. one mic, one speaker. It uses the metadata assisted spatial audio, which is up to 512 kilobits, and it will hit 32 kilohertz. So that's going to be sort of like true natural voice. Is going to be above HD, so it'd be like UHD or Ultra. So that's going to be coming out as well. It's been through the approvals process. It's in the development cycle. It's been tested. You can Google it, and that one's there. So that one's definitely going to be coming out, and that's going to offer us a load of other capabilities. I mean, some of the stuff that we're doing with this is allowing us to actually do enhanced voice audio comparisons. We're able to actually look at the people talking. We're able to isolate background speakers. We're able to voice fingerprint them. We're able to do some speech recognition, regional detection of people. It's a really interesting subject, and that one has really worked well for us. I know I'm running out of time, so just quickly, the only other thing I'll mention today is the impact of 5GC on subscriber identity, the SUPI-SUKI correlation. So our IMSI grabbers are no longer able to do the job they were doing previously. So what we've had to do is a special capability within the core network whereby we allocate effectively the hidden IMSI, which was the SUPI, against the randomized SUKI, so that there's a correlation capability, so that when the IMSI cell site simulator does the attach, it gets the SUKI message, we're able to do the correlation, which is really important for law enforcement. And I think I'm on the money there, Annie.
You are absolutely right on the money, David.
Sorry.
So thank you for that. Again, a lot of information to take in. Now, we have two questions in our Q&A channel, David, and as we're out of time, could I suggest that perhaps you could follow them up on the Q&A channel? Would that be all right? If
Absolutely
you need any help with that, or you'd like to do it by email instead, or any of that stuff, talk to my colleagues and they'll facilitate that for you.
Fantastic. Okay, I will do, Annie. Appreciate the time and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions too.